14th meeting of the Finance Committee. Happy to announce that all of their stellar members are here. Director Jones, Director Monk, glad to see you.
Good evening, sir.
Is there anything, Madam Secretary, in terms of public discussion, public interest?
No, there isn't. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, if it pleases Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
I am very pleased. I hope we get a second.
And you shall.
Just one second. 1 second.
Yes.
A second and a second. Thank you.
No, it's been moved and seconded.
I have
Please,
second.
question.
Roll call. Director Jones?
Aye.
Monk?
Aye.
Scheidegger?
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right. Let's see. Let's move on to financial reports, if we could. Ms. McFarland, Mr. Empedrad, please join us.
Please.
Good evening, Directors. Rhonda McFarland, Chief Financial Officer. This evening, we're reviewing the 7 months ended of January 31st, 2013, which is on page 6 of your packet. I will mention that when we review everything, we compare it to budget, and the board approved the mid-year budget in February, and this is the January statements, but we went ahead and put the mid-year budget in since that's the budget that we will be working towards through June 30th. So it's the more updated numbers that we're comparing the January actuals to. Yes. The next thing we will talk about is our cash balances, which is on page 7 of your report. And I will point out to you that a couple of months ago we reformatted this a little bit so that we grouped the different cash amounts by fund, so you can see how much of the cash relates to the general fund, how much relates to the capital facilities fund, and how much relates to the pension obligation fund, and so forth. This schedule here is showing that our cash balance of $37 million is below what we had last year at this time by about $4 million. And I will say that in looking at that, there are primarily it's been impacted by the fact that we have lower property taxes this year in total in receipts, which we'll talk about further in a little bit. We have not received one of our payments that we normally have by this time, known as our teeter secured amounts, which relates back to last year. And in the prior year, we had already received it. And since this includes all money, not just the general fund, we had our debt proceeds that we have spent down on both improvements to our building as well as equipment.
Question on that page?
Yeah.
Sure.
This is a new report? Cash balance?
No, it is not a new report.
It looks.
That relates to the reserves, which is the next thing that we'll be talking about.
So I'm premature, so please go ahead.
Okay.
Let me interject. On the page 7, I think it was.
Yes.
Yeah, where it's got the totals and the 37 million.
Yes.
You've got a note at the bottom that says, in addition, the district has basically 1.97 in its CalPERS Employer Retirement Benefit Trust, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
Is that separate from the items that are listed above?
Yes. It is not included in the $37 million because it's a trust and it's separate. It's dedicated to paying the retiree benefits. And so we have not included it here, but since it's an important thing that the district has taken on with the board's direction to pre-fund post-retirement medical, we wanted to include that number down there so you could keep an eye on how that balance changes over time.
Okay. I was just looking at the similarity in the names of the OPEB fund and whatever, and there's categories for those, so, thank you.
Yes, we did have an OPEB fund 212F. That's a fund that's at Sacramento County, and at one time it had the money in it that we proceeded to deposit in the SERP trust at CalPERS. And so I believe the small amount that's in there right now was some interest that was posted after the fact, and we will be transferring that to the trust.
All right, thank you.
Okay, and I think that was a good question, just to make sure that people watching are aware that we have started doing that. I will move on to our reserves, and I will tell you that we made a correction on these reserves when I was analyzing the numbers. It didn't make a lot of sense to me. With what was sent out, we had the prior year reserves higher than the current year reserves. And so I asked my staff to recheck those numbers because it didn't make sense to me. And lo and behold, we made a correction to the prior year number. In sending these out, I was focusing on this year's number. And when I come to this presentation, I focus more on talking about what happened since last year. And that's when we were able to pinpoint that we needed a correction there. So let's see. And again, we are about 5.3 million higher than last year as far as our reserves amount. And that's even with not having our teeter money and having lower overall property tax revenues coming in. And so the box on the bottom, you can see that we do fluctuate quarter to quarter. We're targeting to end with about $11.7 million at the end of the fiscal year.
So I do. So let me get this right. I'm supposed to disregard page 8 in the package, and this is an updated page 8 on the screen? That's the corrected one?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
and
thank you.
everything is the same as page 8 except for that blue line that says 1112.
Correct. Thank you.
And we adjusted that.
I have a question, please. Tell me if this is premature, Ms. Rhonda, if I should ask it later in the discussion, but one of Moody's critiques was that our reserves weren't high enough. They quoted 5%. Now, how long of a time period do they average that?
They look at this point in time.
Just
And
the one
so-
single point in time?
Well, they did note that it was higher. They know that the guideline that we followed in the past had been a 5% reserve. And when Chief Hinkie and I discussed it with them, we indicated that there would be a recommendation to increase that. And so they specifically mentioned that in their report
Right.
as supporting that change.
Right. So that's, when we come to that item, it's a potential policy, potential discussion for us to put forward on the agenda for another time, correct?
Right, and in the Moody's report, basically what they were saying is that they wanted to see two things in order for us to, it might have been three, but two that stick in my mind. One is to see our reserve continuing to go up a little bit each year, so it's stabilized. And two was increasing property tax. They want to see that swing in property tax start to come back up. So those are two things that we're cognitive of. Both of them somewhat have to go hand in hand, but we really are trying to control the spending and build those reserves up.
Then perhaps, could the third thing, was that just putting forth a policy that might be the initiation of this committee?
Yes, and I had a discussion earlier in the week with our chairman, Director Scheidegger, and that was one of the things that we discussed, and we're kind of putting together a schedule of things to take a look at in the policy area, and that's absolutely one of the items.
If our chair's on it, that's great. Just another informational purposes. When they talk about reserves, are they looking at general operating fund reserves or everything? And I know everything is kind of touched because some are
They are more
specific.
interested in the general fund reserves.
Okay, thank you.
Because that's the money that we have some discretion over. When you're looking at grant funds or you're looking at development fees, those are restricted to a specific use.
All righty, general operating funds. Best of luck, Mr. Chair. We're right behind you.
Okay, good, thank you.
All right.
Any other questions, Ed?
No.
Okay. You know, I hate to do this, but back to my page 7, when I was asking you about the cash balance, it's not the chart that's showing on the screen, but the chart that's in the package. Is, is that a new chart?
No.
That's what I was asking.
New
This-
layout?
This is the same?
Yes.
Okay. Would it be possible to present that in a comparative way with prior year's status at some point?
Yes.
That's
yes.
just really helpful.
And
I mean, you
that's-
do that in these
and-
other areas and it really helps.
That was an agreement that, when we were discussing, our conversation happened after this report went out. And so any place where we can put prior year numbers at the direction of our chairman, we will be doing that. He finds it helpful. I'm sure the rest of you will find it helpful as well. And those numbers are readily available. So we will augment our information so that you have the prior year numbers.
Thank you very much.
He's a smart man.
Hey. Moving on to our general fund income and expense, this specifically on our revenue. We are, I will mention, 58.3% through the year. So when you see some of these percentages, that's your kind of your benchmark. Year-to-date on medic fees, we're at 13.6 million through January 31st. We're up 2.2 million, or 19% from the prior year. We actually had anticipated that we would be up slightly more than this at this point. The district went through something known as a Medicare revalidation that happened since the first of the year, and due to that process, and it was part of some of the laws that were put in place by the Obama administration to prevent fraud of Medicare. And so it's a good thing, but it did slow up some of our payments from Medicare. And so we've been monitoring closely what's happened in February and March, and we're finally seeing the March numbers come up again. So in addition to what we got on Monday, we got a pretty good deposit on Wednesday as well.
For this month, and we're 1 day short of halfway through, or 2 days short, I guess. I can't read well. It's March. It's almost St. Patrick's Day, that's why. We're at 1.2 million for this month. So I think we're gonna end up exceeding the 2 million and getting back on track on where we needed to be. And we still think that conservatively, we could be more than what we had budgeted. But they withheld payments for 2 or 3 months on us, so that money is now kicking through. Thank you, Rhonda.
Thank you, Chief. And that confirms the same number that I looked up. And so once we get through, if things continue the way they are in the current month, we should be right back on track.
Mr. Chair, just a quick question.
Yes.
Does it just happen to be coincidence that it was the end of some potential fiscal years in July and October compared to last year? Comparing 2012, it was July and October when we have a significant increase in those 2 months from 12 to 13. Does that have anything to do with potential fiscal year closeouts and balancing sheets, or is it just
I hadn't been made
Chance.
aware of any, but I do know that's when the federal government has their fiscal year end. I think that's your point, and I was not aware of that, so.
Well, I was just glancing, and there were the huge jumps, if we're comparing 2012 to 2013, big jumps occurred in July and October compared to the previous year. I was just curious if that might have something to do with the extra jump. Well, we'll wait and see for this year then, see if it, or the next round.
Well, I
I'm
do
sorry, I was
know-
comparing 11-12
Yeah.
with 12-13.
I do know early in 11-12, we did not have the treat no transport. That was a new policy that was put in place mid-year. So when you're comparing the first half of the year to the prior year, that particular, those charges were not in place at that time.
Right, well, this is just the month. If I compare the Julys and the Octobers, that's significant jump from the other months.
Almost double.
So, man, we'll watch it.
Yeah, and we did have new fees that went effective July 1st, and they're of 2012. So there could have
So that might have
possibly
been-
been some lag there as well, so.
Well, you mentioned the delays in payment and a slowness and so forth, so I was just trying to figure out if maybe
And
in
this-
July and October we could expect bumps or not.
Chief Hinkie has reminded us how much our transports have increased, our calls have increased. And so it was pretty apparent that the receipts coming in weren't jiving with the calls, and that's when we started digging in and were able to trace it back to that process that we were going through.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
What kind of a lag are you seeing, Rhonda?
You know, I don't know exactly. I could come in with those numbers for you next meeting if you want to know on average how long it takes to receive, say, for example, the Medicare. It was just brought to my attention when it kind of stopped for a while, for about 2 weeks. And
It'd be unreasonable for us to believe that they'd be paid in 30 days, but what kind of a reasonable lag is there between?
From Medicare or
Yeah.
from, well, it's completely different. It isn't the fact that Medicare was slow paying. It's when you undergo the revalidation process under the new law, the last 2 years, they've froze us. And so when they do that, it was about 60 days that it delayed us in getting paid. And all of a sudden this month, just in the last 2-3 weeks, slugs of drops have started to come in, making up for that because they've unclogged the pipeline.
Well, when we go back and we look at the charts and everything, and like the director pointed out, there is a big gap. As long as we've got a note someplace that we can say, well, there was an audit going on at this time, and
Right, and
60-day.
And that's what we did. I mean, clearly, we were concerned that the call volume was higher than ever and was not matching the revenue. And so, in my direction, I said, we need an answer on why this is. And right about the time we were getting the answer that it was the Medicare thing, they started paying it off, so.
Oh, you've got
We got
to
a lot of
ask
different-
questions.
Just a coincidence, right?
Yeah, we've got a lot of different irons in the fire and trying to get staff to be able to sit down with Whitman, our biller, and go through it. And as I am reminded by EMS on a regular basis, I have to be careful about trending stuff for 30 days. So it really was that 60-day deal, and they went, okay, yeah, we've got an issue.
I just had one more quick question. On the revenue expenditure chart, 9,600, the line item 9,600 is significantly low for a large amount. Does that include community risk reduction?
it absolutely does.
Okay, thank you.
Which leads right into the next box here, which is community risk reduction. We are year-to-date at 1.1 million at January 31st. It is up 418,000 from the prior year, but we're only at 22.5% of the budget with 58% of the year transpired. We've had some problems in executing the program. More resources are being put towards it. We have pretty much as a trend have steadily seen the income going up each month, but we were anticipating to be in the neighborhood of 400,000 a month, and we're in January it was 164,000, February it was 185,000, so we're moving in the right direction, but it's my opinion that we may fall short of that budget, and my best estimate would be about $1.5 million at this point, but depending on how much results we see from the additional resources that Chief Iverson has put towards this program. We have people coming in on an overtime basis to do some of the more technical inspections of the larger buildings and so forth in an effort to get this back on track.
Are we still having programming problems with the?
Yeah, this is got issues on multiple fronts. First, technology did not pan out. We are having very, very much difficulty with both the billing company that we were using, and we're having big difficulty with a software company that we've been using for years. Those two issues are hot and active right now in regards to how we're going to fix those. One of them is Firehouse, our reporting software. We are advising them, I believe today or tomorrow, that we are not beta testing their product anymore, and that legal will be consulted, and they either send staff out here and reimburse us for the expenses, or we're going to have other issues. I believe the system eventually will work, and it'll work well. The problem is they were not able to deliver on what they said they could deliver on. In regards to the other inspection program, that company failed miserably in the billing aspect of it. There's been multiple problems with that. So we've been dealing with that issue in regards to self-inspection and that. So the following actions have been taken. We've moved a very, very strong battalion chief in there underneath Chief Iverson. We have developed a series of objectives under Deputy Chief Cockram, who's been on top of this and should be credited for bringing this to us early. And we're making some dramatic changes where we anticipate putting upwards of 4 to 6 more inspectors on the street. And this is a logistics problem at this point in time. We're having to do it in hard paper instead of on the technology venue, because that failed us. So we've transitioned to that, and we're going to have to put more bodies at it to get it accomplished. So it has not been without its challenges. I would say that Ms. McFarland's right. I think if we're $1 million to $1.5 million short, that's where we're going to be. What I would remind everybody is that when you take on large programs, which we did, and you have high risk and high gain, sometimes things pop up that are outside of our control. But we are working very diligently on shoring that up and getting the bugs worked out. And so we will keep you guys informed absolutely every step of the way. And in regards to how it pans for the budget, remember we ended up with about $2-point-something million in excess revenue that we did not anticipate. In other words, our property taxes dropped a lot less than what we thought, by about half. So we have the ability, we believe, to come in pretty close where we're on budget. It would just mean that we're not dealing with the SCRS issue that we decided to throw those revenues at in this current fiscal year. So we are on top of this issue. We have put a lot of resources in management, strengthened the management component over there, and that has been in place for just about 2 weeks now, and we're already starting to see changes. So
I have a question on that, Chief. I appreciate your update. You mentioned the efforts that you've made to improve the programming, the software, and the very diligent efforts you're making, to improve the program internally. And those are much appreciated. I didn't catch what you said we're doing in terms of the billing company. Are we meeting with them? Have we identified specific areas?
Yeah, they had bad data. They delivered bad data, and the problem is that we needed to correct it. Now we're in the process of getting that corrected, and at this point, it's you don't change horses at this point 3/4 of the way through the stream. If we can get a refined product that's there. But I have told the membership in the department and the board of directors and to the public is, I'm not happy as the fire chief with where this is at right now. There's a variety of people that understand, both in the private sector that we were depending on, and when people say, well, government should always go to private sector, well, we're depending on private sector in the technology arena to deliver, and they're not able to do that. So at the end of the day, there's enough blame to go around, and I accept 120% responsibility for us falling short in this area. But I can tell you that we're working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to correct this issue and get it up and running. And I feel comfortable that we will get the bugs worked out and we will get to where we need to be.
Well, stuff happens, and I think we ought to look at this as with a long-term benefit and a
Right.
long-term vision. And so we appreciate your efforts and the update. Thank you.
Bet.
Any other
Mr.
questions?
Chair? Yes, no, I would like to, Chief has laid out the challenges for the future, but today I'd like to have everyone take a look. We're up 63% over last year, so there has been improvement, but we have set a high standard,
Yeah.
and that's been a high challenge for us.
Yep.
But however, we are significantly succeeding over last year, and so we're going to take the broader perspective, let's also put that little extra positive check in it.
Yeah, and I agree with that, Director Jones. At the end of the day, we're going to be a couple 100% more than what we collected in previous years. But it's new programs, it's getting them off the ground, it's getting that technology bugged out, and I concur with you. It's exciting. It's just frustrating at this point when, you know, the world runs on computers and software. And when for the lack of a better word, those techno people come in and tell us that we can solve your problems, and then you believe them, and you can't get that done, it's complicated and it's frustrating. But we're on top of it, and listen, we're not blameless on our end either. We've had some issues that we've had to deal with on our end, and we are dealing with them.
Thank you.
I've brought up before, having come from fire prevention in my past career and everything, Chief, are we getting the firefighters that are doing the inspections out there with us, all the training necessary that they need to do the job for us? My issue is we've replaced a lot of firefighters in this district, and not knowing the training that they brought in their toolboxes with them from other agencies, are we making sure that they're being provided all the training necessary to be able to go out and do these inspections for us?
Well, what I would say is that you got to have 5 years on the job to be a fire captain here. Inspections are not new to the fire service, so is there some catch-up that maybe needs to be done and some brushing up? Yes. I think that what we're dealing with here is we had a fire prevention division that used to have somewhere around 20, 24 people in it, and it was cut in half prior to anybody up there or us being here, and we're dealing with that fallout. So when we talk about succession planning, whether it's at the engine company level in doing inspections or in the fire prevention level, we're struggling in this arena, and we're addressing those issues. It's difficult. We are putting on training for the people we're bringing in. Somebody might go, why are you going to bring people in on overtime to do it? It's because it's cost effective and we can put more people out there to get it done. If it wasn't cost effective, we wouldn't be doing it. And in regards to the inspections that we've got the engine companies, I'll say this about the engine companies, you know, they're doing a yo person's job out there and getting this done. We've identified some areas that we could do some improvement in. I've actually talked about doing a video, having a video, and I think they're working on that to get it out to the stations for a training video on inspections and frequently asked questions. So all of that stuff's being addressed on a 360-degree basis, and I think that will help us certainly as we have the challenges going through the end of this fiscal year. It certainly will set the stage for a lot better operation for next fiscal year.
Yeah, it's difficult enough in agencies this size, keeping up with the training of your personnel and everything, but when we're having a turnover of 48, 50 or better on an annual basis, trying to keep up with training for new people and ongoing training for your staff that's on, in an area that, well, let's face it, they didn't do a whole lot because of the changes that this district's gone through in agencies and agencies. So I just want to make sure that they've got the tools necessary to be able to go out and do the job for us.
The other thing I'd add, in fairness to us, is that this is, for us, a new program, and we're making some adjustments. We're learning in terms of the number of on-site inspections. I think we underestimated how that was going to be called, and we'll be better next year. You know, that's...
And you raise a good point. You know, the on-site inspections, we identified around 4,000 where it was just they didn't respond. It wasn't that they necessarily wanted the inspectors to come out. Now, this is all fair and candor so that the community knows. It was because they didn't respond. They wadded it up, they threw it in the trash, and all of a sudden the inspector, the engine crew shows up and says, you didn't do your inspection. Oh yeah, I didn't think that was real. So, you know, we're working through a lot of bumps, and when you're looking at 4,000 inspections with that, so in of that of itself, if you got 3/4 of those that said, yeah, I'd choose to do the self-inspection program, we're making that available to them. Here's your deal, you got so many days to get it done, and that's great, you know, have a good day. We're trying to really work with the community, and the business community has been patient. So I think that, you know, part of the responsibility too is of the people that are out there is to open your mail. But when businesses get 50,000 pieces of mail a day, and that's an exaggeration for those out there, but some probably do, you know, sometimes stuff gets missed.
Yeah.
So we're working through that.
Good. Thank you. Anything else?
I'll just add that I do appreciate you adding Chief Cochran in there with his expertise in fire prevention to be able to help them out in streamlining the process. Appreciate that.
Okay, please
All right.
go on.
So I'm going to go on to property taxes, and
Thank
I'll
you.
refer you to page 10 of your information. And we've been waiting for quite some time for our property tax money through the county, and we did receive the bulk of the first half of the money in January. And so year-to-date, we're at $56.2 million. It is $3.3 million lower than the prior year. And, but despite that, it was good news. We talked about this when we did our mid-year budget, that we had anticipated in the neighborhood of an overall annual, and this is only half of it, but overall annual $4 million drop, and it came in at 1.9 million. So that allowed us to add that additional money back into the budget in the revenue when we did the mid-year. The reason that we're lower than last year at this time is twofold. First of all, even with getting more money than we anticipated, it is still a drop in property taxes over the prior year. And just to reiterate, because this has been such a large magnitude of a hit on this agency for people that might be watching this, this puts us at a cumulative loss of $24 million per year. So it's been huge, a huge impact of this recession. And the second part of why it's 3.3 million lower, as I mentioned previously when we were talking about the cash and the reserves, we had received our teeter money last year in December, and to date we have not received that money. We were able to, with the Chief Hinkey's assistance, find out what we anticipate that amount to be. And based on the figure that we were given, we believe that it will be about $500,000 short of what we have in the budget. So I have asked for the backup for their calculations, and to date I have not received them. I think it's about a week since he promised them to me. So if I don't have them by Monday, I will remind him again. They've had some issues in that office at the county. They've had turnover of some key personnel and some, succession planning that maybe didn't happen and kind of caught them by surprise, and they've had to pick up the ball and try to move it through, but they're clearly behind and we're not getting the information that we need. But we do, I did confer with HDL, our consultant, as soon as I found out this information, and they were quite surprised by it, so we're all very anxious to see what those reports look like. And I will tell you that we have scheduled HDL to come and make a presentation on property taxes. I believe it is next month, and that will probably, I believe we'll be doing that for the full board, because I think all the board members will want to be interested since it's such a large part of our revenue.
I think it's a good idea.
And they'll be able to kind of review what's happened this last year and where we think we're going. And we, at this point, with the meetings that we've had and the numbers that we've looked at, we believe we have hit bottom and we'll start turning around. And right before I came to this meeting, I did get something from the assessor chief, and with a, as she put, estimate only for budget planning purposes of, what's going to happen with Prop 8 next year. And in our case, it was not a negative number. In other words, it was not giving money back under Prop 8. It was instead a positive number. So I will be taking a look at that more and making sure that HDL, they're on the same distribution I am, so I know they did get it. When I first started working with them, I kept forwarding them things until they finally said, no, I get this too. So, but I will be talking to them about what we received. I'll be reviewing it with both Chief Hinkey and Chief Wells, and it'll be information that we use as we put together our estimates for our 13-14 revenue budget. So, the good news and the bad news.
Any questions on that page? Okay, thank you.
Okay. So total revenue, we're at $76.2 million. It's $472,000 lower than the prior year, 0.6% decrease. We know we're waiting for about $1.4 million, so had we received the teeter in the normal timeline, we would have been $1 million ahead of the prior year. So it's a cash flow thing as far as the comparison between the prior year. Let me go on to expenses. This is page 9 of your packet. Our general fund operating expenditures, we have $74.1 million in labor costs. That's net of $5.9 million in concessions that were done mid-contract by our employees. I will say that we've talked in prior months that our labor amount was higher, and we did adjust it at mid-year because of the deployments. I've been monitoring that money coming in, and we have collected everything through all of the August and September billing. So of the 1.9 we billed, we have a balance of $990,000. So we've received almost half of what we've billed out. So that is coming in. That percentage of budget is 55.4. We are at 58 point something of the year. As I've mentioned previously, with the new single role paramedic program, those personnel began January 1, so we did anticipate a higher labor cost in the last half of the year than the first half of the year. So I'm feeling comfortable with where we are on that. And service and supplies are in line with the budget as well at 44.6%. I'm going to try to speed it up because I want to make sure I can get through the Moody's report and so forth. But
Great.
Please ask questions if you have them, but if I'm talking faster, it's because I can see that
Good.
my time is kind of running short here. Reserves, capital facilities, it looks very much like last month. We've used $1.1 million of reserves related to our debt service. We are on track with our development fees. We were very conservative with that budget. We're at 62.7% of budget on development fees. Okay, grant activity. We have expended $5.2 million. We have a balance of $12.2 million. We had a total of new awards to date of $6.1 million, and we do have other applications that are pending. We've been informed at this point that sequestration for those grants will not be impacted. That was some new information that came in this week. It will be longer out into the future where we may see impacts of sequestration. This is kind of jumping back to the general fund, but we also were informed that there was a small, I think $8 or so drop in reimbursement on Medicare due to sequestration, with Whitman anticipating a $133,000 impact. So not major, but we always like it to go the other direction, not down. So, and that is my report.
Questions? Ms. McFarland, very good as always. Thank you very much.
Very welcome.
All right. Get to it.
Okay.
The pension bond rating.
Yes. Whenever I go through a bond rating, I kind of think of it kind of like finance's report card. And so I thought it would be a good idea to share that with all of you so you could see what a very astute outside party thinks about the district and its finances. Back in November, we were informed that we were being put on for a potential drop in our rating. That was done for every California agency that had issued pension bonds, us included. And we have a few unique things that we thought would make us stand apart from the rest. One is the intercept that happens at the Sacramento County, where the debt service funds are removed from the property taxes before they provide them to us, and that money stays in there until the debt service payments are due. That's quite unique. And Secondly, being the fact that the board has the policy in place to retire the bonds early and had the money set aside for that. So they do mention that in their report, but they decided to take a firm line with all of these pension bonds, and they they decided to lower the rating for anyone that did not have the bonds approved through a general obligation process. And it is now their policy to have them 2 levels below what the general bond rating is. They did not change our general bond rating, but since these are not general bonds, they knocked it 2 spots lower. In the past, it was 1 spot lower. So our general bond rating is AA3. The pension bonds had been a single A1, and they are now a single A2. They did give us a lot of information that's really helpful. It really confirmed a lot of the things that we are working on, specifically, as we discussed earlier, the issue with they want to start seeing property tax monies return. They were concerned about the pressure on our liquidity from our obligations for both pension and OPEB costs, and they were very pleased with the things that we had done, and they believe, based in the long term, that that will serve to improve our rating in the future. They also wanted us to have higher reserve levels. We have, I've written both guidelines for others and also a number of reserve policies in the past, and so that is one of the things that we'll be working on. I thought that was probably more appropriate to get through our negotiations process before I proceeded on that. So I, having only been here a year and a half, I'm not sure how you've proceeded in the past, but I kind of envision that if it is a financial policy, that this committee would review it, and then if it needs also go to the policy committee, then hopefully somebody will advise me of that. Maybe it'll be a 2-part process. Maybe we have a joint meeting, or maybe we pass it between one committee and another. So maybe that's something that you might want to think about and talk to the chief about, and he can let me know.
Okay.
But we
Any
have
preliminary thoughts, or do you want to talk to the chief and let this percolate a little bit?
I think we ought to, let's just, whether a joint meeting might be more appropriate, or even if, or finance can do it and put it to the whole board in an evening, perhaps. I'm just a little, well, again, how long do we have to have our pre-funding of OPEB in place, which exists now? This letter's dated March 14th. It exists now. Pension reform savings is already in the works. I'd say half of these things that they mention in their letter are already on the table. So how long?
Well, just to kind of share a little bit more of the background with you, the analyst that we dealt with in New York had actually recommended that they not lower our rating, and he had not made that recommendation on anyone else in that had not been a GO bond. He took it to a committee, and it's based on the committee's decision, and they overruled his recommendation, which I think bodes well that we were quite strong, but they wanted to have a consistent policy through all of these non-general bond pension, taxable pension bonds.
If I can jump in here, this is, I think, this is my professional and personal opinion, this is what happens when the Stocktons of the world and the San Bernardinos of the world, and that in California, decide that they're not going to pay their bills. They got pension obligation bonds out there and hundreds of millions of dollars that are out there. They're trying to default on those bonds. And at the end of the day, the bond insurers and the bond holders are going to sit there and go, you know what? We're not going to take those haircuts on our own without affecting how we grade those. So across the state of California, they basically were going, we're going to downgrade pension bonds across the board. We actively, CFO McFarland, myself, and staff opposed that. And we were on and asked that we be separated out from that because of all these things that we have done. And so Rhonda's right. At the end of the day, the analysts that we were dealing with went back to a committee, which is what they have to do, and actually recommended that we not be downgraded. So that was a huge, huge issue. They recognized it. And at the end of the day, the committee basically, I think, went,
Broad
well,
brush.
that's great, broad brush, this is the way we're going to do it. And all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put the egg back up on the wall again. So what we've got to do is continue to work steadily. The pension pre-funding, we didn't have that mechanism fully voted in yet for the pre-funding, which we just did. We put money aside, 1.7, but when they did our bond rating here, we had not had labor passed, and we haven't passed the actual pre-funding mechanism where our employees will be paying.
On the OPEB.
Okay, on the OPEB. So there's going to be one that comes in there. And we also were preparing to come to both the Finance Committee and the Board of Directors as we prepare budget with a recommended goal of 15% reserve. King, Campo, Rhonda, everybody had been researching for where we really should be of operating expenses. And that's really what it's come down to is about that goal. And mysteriously enough, we can't even find the 5%. That was something that the board apparently publicly said they wanted, but we've been really unable to nail that down. So as we put the goal-setting session that's coming up with the Board of Directors, and it's really your policy decision, we are going to be bringing some recommendations to address those issues prior to the building of next year's budget, and hopefully building those things to where we can build our reserves and at the same time have those reserves targeted for a 15% level, which we think is more appropriate. And that'll be a long-term deal. We won't get there overnight, but I think the bond companies want to know that the rating companies want to know that you're working on it, just like the pre-funding of the OPEB.
So we're taking steps. We have the analyst having a positive feeling. It looks good for the future. I guess the main impact on this is that in terms of our efforts at some point to retire bonds or to seek more bonds, this is the concern we're going to have in terms of the level of rating. So it's going to cost us more if we don't. So it's a very good effort.
Yeah, if I will say immediately it doesn't cost us anything. I would believe that it would impact our bondholders, that the market value of those bonds may decline.
The value would.
There is a linkage between that and the rating. I don't believe that we would be issuing any more pension bonds, and obviously the higher your rating is, the lower your interest rate is whenever you issue bonds. So we always try to put a structure together that protects the bondholders. They're loaning an agency money, and it's not an unrealistic expectation to be paid back. And so we need to give them that assurance, and that's the process in place.
And to add to that, this just affects the pension obligation bonds. Our general rating, bond rating, am I correct, remained unchanged. They did not lower our general bond rating. This specifically has to do with pension obligation bonds. And that's because those are the bonds out there that are suffering the big impacts by cities not coming to fruition on those bonds.
I'll just make one final point. Typically what I've experienced is that they'll come back and review bonds probably every 3 years unless they have a reason like a Stockton or something happening that makes them take a sooner look. I made an agreement with our analyst to have him look at us a year from now.
Good.
Because I said, we will be able to see if indeed we hit bottom on taxes and are starting to see that return, albeit slowly, but return, going the right direction. We will have had more of a chance to have some of these reforms in place to help pay for the pension and the OPEB. And we did bring in new leadership within the last 2 years of Chief Hankey and the finance staff. And I think there hasn't been enough time to totally bring, enough to see. I know we definitely know we're making progress, but the longer we have here, the more results that you will see. And so he agreed to do that. And I said we would like him assigned since he recommended us. And since we spent a lot of time with him, getting him familiar with our operation, you can see from how detailed his report was that he had a pretty good idea of what we're doing here. And so to build on that, I didn't want to have to start over. So he said generally that's what happens, that he would be reassigned, and he agreed to put us on the calendar for a year from now.
Good. Committee members, any more questions?
Oh, I'd just like to comment that I am probably just maybe not as frustrated as the finance or the chief's office is on this, But I am frustrated that all these check marks that we've been doing, and then all of a sudden, it's a committee decision and we're grouped. If that's the way the world works, fine, but there should be, well, they don't want to go more individual. It's frustrating that that effort's not recognized, so I'll look forward to a year and a review, and hopefully the climate will change so that they'll look at the individual.
Right. I will say, based on that discussion, they intend to always keep that two-notch rating. So to get the pension bond rating up, we have to get our general bond rating up. And I believe that we're poised to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, I appreciate your frustration, but I think it's also very good for this committee to understand the steps that our department has taken. And I think the citizens out there need to appreciate that. It's just making us a better outfit. So thank you very much, Rhonda, for your work.
Appreciate all your support, and thank Chief Henke for all his help with this bond re-rating as well.
All right. Are there legal bills? I didn't get them in my package.
They're in your file folder under legal bills.
Well, that's
No,
probably
no.
true.
I'll make a motion, we pay the legal bills.
And I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Call for the question.
Directors Monk,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Scheidegger.
I abstain. I didn't see it. Sorry.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you. Any agenda items for the next meeting?
Well, we might want to move that policy, of reserves. Is that-
At least discuss.
Discuss the
policies.
strategy for the policy? Is that what you're talking about? Or
Well, I want to get the
To
show on
start
the
with.
road, that's
To
all.
start with, yeah.
I want to get it rolling, so whatever verbiage is appropriate, you and the chief can work in consultation with Ms. McFarland and the CFO, and,
are you comfortable with that? We'll just offline?
yeah.
Yeah, that'd be fine. I think that would allow us some planning to put some stuff together to bring back to you, the Finance Committee to take a look at, and then that'll play into our direction for budget. I fully feel comfortable we're going to be recommending that 15% level. I mean, I think that's what we've got to do, and, that's a goal that you're trying to get to, and so it's not going to happen overnight, but the sooner we can get that as a policy of the board, that would be better. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll get together and have that ready for the next meeting. The next meeting will be April 11th, 5 o'clock, right here. Any other matters, committee members, anything you want to say?
Not at this
Sure,
point.
I'm good?
Thank you all very much. Meeting's adjourned.
Okay.